So you think you draw like a potato, or maybe every time you draw something goes wrong, and all you've ever really wanted is to just draw beautiful, realistic, elegant faces. Well, I can help you with that, but it's gonna take a lot of practice. So let's practice going from day one to also day one, but better. Okay, materials. We're gonna need a sheet of graph paper, an optional sheet of blank paper, although I do really recommend it, and a mechanical pencil or a regular pencil. I like mechanical because I feel like I have more control, and an eraser. And your pencil might already have an eraser, but sometimes an extra one is just good to have on hand. Okay, so let's get started with our graph paper and our pencil. It might be tempting to go straight in and just try drawing a face, and we're not doing that today. Nope, we are going to be descriptive. In fact, we are going to describe all the facial features with words before we start drawing. You can choose any facial features that you want, but if it's your first time drawing, you might want to follow me. So, first, I'm starting off with an oval face shape. An oval face shape actually tells me a lot about what the overall impression of this face is going to be. And I think it's easy, so if you want something easy, definitely follow me. For my second facial feature, I'm going to do wide eyes, and I think I want to make them a little bit hooded. Now, hooded just means that the eyelid is a bit closer to the eye. It's just a little bit of description, but it'll help me really solidify myself. Next, I'm going to do a Cupid's bow lip shape. Cupid's bow just means it has a little V at the top, and my last feature is just a wide nose. Now that we've written this, it's time to start drawing this, which is step 2. Practice drawing each of these written features individually. If you've never done this before, please feel free to follow along. It might make it a lot less stressful. What I like to do when I'm starting with a feature, especially a face, is I'm going to mark each of the outermost points with dots, and this will help me really visualize the shape that I'm trying to make. So as you can see, I've made the vertical dots longer than the horizontal dots, and that gives the impression of an oval. And then I'm just connecting them, and I'm going to try this a couple times until I get the oval shape that I want. This can help me warm up, but it also helps me solidify the oval shape that I'm going for, which is important because we're practicing. Moving on to the eyes, it's going to be a very similar process to what we did with our face shape. And just because eyes can get pretty detailed and pretty crazy, today we're going to focus on less detail because that will be easier for us, and I don't want to make your life hard and stressful. So, just as before, we are going to set our dots, and because I want wide eyes, I'm going to set my dots a little bit further apart than I would have intuitively done. Then I'm going to connect these dots, and I'm going to analyze the proportions. Okay, so this is the eye shape, but there's no eye to it yet. I'm going to need my iris. As you can see, I'm kind of visually planning out how big I need this iris to be. Too big will look weird, too small will look weird. So I want something right in between. It's going to be perfectly in the center with an even space on either side. Now we have the basic frame of the eye, but what about the eyelid? This is important to giving depth to the face, and although it is a little bit of extra detail than you might think of doing, it is pretty necessary. Now I said hooded, which really just means the eyelids are closer to the eye than you might think they should be. So again, I'm planning out with a dot, and then I'm just going to arch that along the same curve of the eye. If you have trouble with dexterity, please feel free to try these lines as many times as you need to. In fact, I'm gonna do this myself. I don't really like how straight across this eye looks. It's just a little weird. And you know what? I think that's because the dots that I placed at first for the corners are just too perfectly horizontal with each other. And we can fix that, even on graph paper, especially with graph paper. What I'm doing is I'm bringing that inner corner dot just a little bit more down. And you can see when I outline the shape, it makes it look a lot more natural and eye-shaped. I'm adding my eyelid and my iris, and although I said less detail is easier, there is one final step that makes an eye just a little bit more like an eye, and that is your pupil. Pupil is going to be a basic circle at the center of the eye. If it's too tricky for you to do, don't try. It's totally okay, but if you can do it, go for it. Now on to our Cupid bow lips. So as I said before, Cupid bow lips just mean that your upper lip has a little V shape at the top. Now, just as we did when we made our eye shape, we're going to start with the two outer corners of the lips. This will help define how wide you want your lips, or, as you'll see later, how thick you want your lips. So we're going to mark those with just 2 dots. And we said V shape, and just like we did with our hooded eyelids on our eyes, we are going to mark that out with some dots. I'm going to make this little V shape above the 2 dots that I made before by placing 3 dots and just attaching the lines. This needs to be above, if you're doing this shape, it needs to be above your 2 corner lips because your upper lip is not going to go past the seal of your lip. Now, try connecting all the dots. I've added a lower dot for the lower lip for where I want that lowest point to be. Then I'm connecting the sides to that lower dot, the lower dot to the side, and then following through the side dots to the top of my little V shape with the Cupid's bow. Now, to create the actual lip separation part, I'm just choosing a halfway point between my top and my bottom lip, and I'm marking it and then just putting a straight line across. Now, lips don't really have a straight line across, but that's what we're doing today to keep our lives easy, and it represents a lip enough. So, how do you change the thickness of a lip? Well, when we plan our dots, we're going to start out with the same corners, but now when we make that top lip dot and the bottom lip dot, we're going to make them a little bit closer together. This is where graph paper is really useful because we can actually measure the distance between that top lip and that bottom lip dot. As you can see, on my first lips, they're about 2 blocks apart. Or on my second lips that I just drew here, they're more like 1 block apart. I can do it again and make them as thin as I want. I can also reverse this process and make them thicker. You can do whatever lip shape you want. Just know that if you're deciding on thickness, it really just depends on the space between that upper dot and that lower dot. Alright, let's move on to the nose. Now a nose is made of 3 parts, the nostrils, the tip, and the bridge. And when we're making a specific shape of nose, like a wide nose, that's going to change each of these features. So when planning a nose, I like to start out with just a basic circle. It doesn't have to be perfect, we'll erase it later. It just gives us a good reference point to place our dots. We're going to place a dot at that lowermost circle and then 2 dots right next to it. You might want to just follow along with me here because noses are hard, man. So then, using my graphing blocks, I'm placing a dot to the upper diagonal of each of those outer dots and connecting them with a curve. Then I'm finding a midpoint between those dots, the middle dot, and the side dot, and I'm outlining that shape of the original circle that we drew. I'm adding these little blips, and that is a nostril. I know noses are super complicated. If you want to watch that section a couple times and maybe just copy what I do so that it can solidify for you, totally go for it. It's totally okay. This part, I'm just adding a little bit of a soft line to that upper part of the nostril so it blends into the non-existent face, and then just defining that outer edge of the circle. As I said before, we're erasing this circle, and we're left with the tip and the nostril part of our nose, which just leaves the bridge section. The bridge can shape the nose a lot. What I like to do is to place 2 marker dots right above those 2 side dots at the very bottom. That helps mark how wide the nose should be. Following the same curvature of the nostrils, I'm going to draw a line in between those 2 dots that I just placed, just to show you what a more narrow bridge would look like. Now this does not align with my wide nose ideal, so I'm going to quickly erase that and show you what a wide nose should look like. Replacing those dots, I'm going to draw slightly outside of those. You can think of these 2 dots as a kind of medium thickness nose, medium width, if you will. So by drawing outside those 2 dots, I'm establishing that that's a wide nose. Those dots are really just for reference, so we can erase those. I like the distance between the uppermost part of the bridge to the bottommost part of the tip, but this might need practice for you. I'm going to draw now a nose that is similar, but you'll see ends up being very different. I'm starting with that circle and that bottom dot and the side dots, but my circle is actually bigger than the last circle I made, even though the side dots are equidistant. So by drawing this and my nostrils, you'll see that it actually makes quite a broad nose. By enlarging that tip, it makes the nostrils look smaller. This isn't really what I want to go for my drawing, but I think it's good comparison so that you can see how changing one feature of a nose really affects all the other features. Again, noses are really tricky, so if you want to watch that section as many times as you need to practice, totally do so. Step 3. Practice assembling the features we just made and use your little examples as reference. We don't have a reference photo, but we just did describe the features that we want and drew examples. So we're going to start with our face shape. Another wonderful thing about using graph paper is I can directly count how many blocks I used in my little example. So it's 3 blocks tall times 2 blocks wide, which I can section out into thirds going up and down, 1, 2, 3. Each section is roughly the same as the next. So when we start drawing our larger version, when I want to make a face shape, I don't need to count how many little blocks that I'm making because I can make my own. I've put 2 lines, and by drawing the shape of the middle line, copying it above the upper and below the bottom in roughly the same size, I've created my thirds. I've created my first third, my second third, and my third. And by turning them horizontal, I can also measure the width, which is 2. Now, just as we did with the practice, I'm making those same dots at the top and at the bottom, and the sides for the width. Also, just as I did before, I'm going to reference my practice to make sure that as I'm drawing this assembly piece, it's coming out the way that I want it to. I like the more curved shape, so as I'm drawing this and connecting my dots, I'm paying extra careful attention to making my lines curved. I've erased this middle part now because we really don't need it, but what we do need are the middle sections. So we're going to connect our side dots together with just a horizontal line, and that's going to be our horizontal half. And then we're going to connect our vertical dots up and down, and that's going to be our vertical half. This will help us focus on symmetry and placement, which is one of the most important things for making a face look like a proper face. So when I start with the face, I like to start with the eyes, and you'll see how this builds upon itself later. It's important to not make the eyes too close together nor too far apart. It might help you to draw some dots, and before drawing the actual eye, just look at the dots and see if that's really where it makes the most sense for an eye to be. Now, most of drawing is actually just seeing the proportions, so if you need to practice, please practice. Again, I'm referencing my little examples, remembering that little diagonal dot thing that I did before and copying it down. I'm then just going to quickly draw the eyes the same way that I did before, complete with the irises and my hooded eyelids, and it should look quite similar to my practice ones because that was the point of practicing. Now, on to the nose. I know we didn't do nose in that order, but when we're assembling a face, it's best to start with the eyes and then go to the nose. We don't want too high of a nose, but we don't want too low of a nose either. So I'm marking a middle place where I think it would be good to be. As you can see, this is below our half line, but not significantly. As you can see here, I mess up, and that's okay because noses are hard, man. But I'm still following roughly the same process that I did when I was practicing. I have my tip, my nostrils, and my bridge, and you'll see my bridge looks comfortably even between my 2 eyes. And because my nose isn't too long, the bridge length still makes sense with the face. Now I have about a whole third left of the lower half of the face, and that's where our lips are gonna go. Now, lips that are too low will not look good, and lips that are too high won't look too good. So I'm gonna find a secret middle area. And again, most of drawing is seeing, so please feel free to play around with placement before you really decide on where you want your lips to be. After drawing my dots, look at where I placed them. Now you'll notice that they don't go past the vertical line that the iris crosses through, and this is because that is a typical proportion of a face. If you wanted a wider mouth, you would extend it past that line, and if you wanted a more narrow mouth, you would extend it in between the dots of the nose. After finishing your lips, it's time for step 4. Review your face. If you want more basic feature practice, repeat the steps 2 and 3 until you feel confident to move on. Knowing how to draw each feature and its proportion to each other is really the most important part of understanding a face. If you're ready to move on, I've just switched the face that I just drew onto a new sheet of paper that has less writing so that we can start adding more details. So, eyebrows. They're gonna create a lot of expression. You see, if I draw them high and curved like this, she looks quite surprised. If that's part of your intention for your face, go for it. But maybe you want angry. How do you draw angry? You make them more slanted and closer to the eyes. As you can see, she is angry. I don't want either of these though, so I'm gonna erase it and show you how to draw more neutral eyebrows. Now I'm not just going to draw a line either. I'm actually going to measure, with my dots again, how to draw a neutral eyebrow that's proportional to the face. So, we're going to start by finding our middle line and our outermost line. We do not want to cross either one of these lines when making our eyebrow, so I'm going to go about 1 block inward, which is why it's useful to have graph paper again, to make my neutral eyebrow. I'm also going to make these 2 endpoints horizontal to each other. I'm going to do 2 of these eyebrows at the same time, but if that's overwhelming for you, you can do 1 at a time. However, they will be symmetrical. As you can see, they're all in one straight line, and if I draw it like that, it doesn't quite look right. In fact, she looks a little bit sad, and that's because eyebrows aren't naturally that straight. They might be, but not for our practice here. Which means we need to add a little apex, which is just going to be in the outermost corner slightly above. The more curved that you make it, the more surprised she will be. So I'm making it quite low, about half a block low. By connecting the lines, I get this basic idea of what my eyebrows will look like, but eyebrows are not that blocky. So to make them less blocky, we're going to add a curved line that smooths out that little point that we just made. Now, you might think, why even make the point? And the truth is, we do it so that they are symmetrical. You might feel confident to just wing that curve, but if you take the time to draw that little apex part, it will look more symmetrical. Anyway, we're making that top dot right above that inner dot and connecting that to the side, and that is a pretty decent eyebrow shape. Once we erase that little extra middle line and then add a center line between the top dots, we have eyebrows. Next thing we need is ears. Now, ears rely on the eyebrow and the nose, but it depends how you draw them. And here, if I draw them like this, they do not look right, and that's because we violated proportions. Those are some big ears. So, to draw more average looking ears, we're going to make a line following that little grid that we have right at the end of the nose, at the end of the tip and the nostrils, and then somewhere in between our eyebrows and our eyelid. Ears are also pretty complicated, so we're just going to do a very brief shape just to give you the impression of an ear. Ears go up a little bit at the top, so you might want to mark a little dot for how much they want to go up, and it won't be much. As you can see here, I'm doing about half a square. Just as we do with all of our other features, we're then going to connect the dots, but see how close I bring it into the face? Ears don't come out as much as you think unless you really want them to. It kind of aligns with the side of the face, and that's a very basic ear shape. What is a face without hair? But there's a lot of ways you can draw hair. Straight hair, in my opinion, is the easiest because there's less detail and less texture. but there are a lot of other things to decide too, like volume, sleekness, bangs, or length. Volume is going to add width. It's going to make it tall and wide, and it's going to make the face look smaller, actually. Compared to a sleek, it's going to be closer to the face. Obviously, bangs go across. And then length will be how far the hair goes past the chin. Now, for our exercise, I do not want long hair. So I'm going to mark the end of my hair for the length before I decide anything else, right above the chin and right below the lip. Because I'm deciding to do straight hair, I don't want to make it too voluminous. And a good way to just do kind of an average voluminity is just a little bit past the edge of the ears that we drew. See how this is all kind of building on each other? We needed the eyebrows to draw the ears, and we need the ears to draw the hair. Now, I want a middle part, so I'm just going to reinforce that dot at the top of her forehead, which will also help me decide how tall the hair should be. This can be a tricky part because you don't want a big head, but you don't want a big face either. So, a good measure is just do 2 blocks above. As you can see, I marked 1 dot and I didn't like it, so I'm making it 2. Now, you can sort of start to see the hair coming together, but what about the hairstyle with the face? This can get really complicated. So all I'm going to do for purposes of simplicity is just pretend that the hair is tucked behind the ear. I'm going to lightly outline this. As you can see, I'm not pressing very hard, and this is just so I can really visualize that the height and the width I've decided on makes sense. And I like it, so I'm going with it. I'm connecting that outermost ear to the bottom dots for the hair, and then I'm going to connect that bottom dot I just did to the face. This is going to be a very blunt edge cut, and because hair is never a straight line at the bottom, I'm just going to add a little bit of texture by making a squiggly line right where that straight line used to be on both sides. Going back to what I drew lightly, I do like it, so I'm just going to draw over it with a little bit more pressure so that it becomes part of the drawing. Now, this looks like hair, but it kind of makes her face look weird, don't you think? I don't want to give her bangs, but she needs something with her hairline, so I'm just going to erase that top dot to the top part of the ear so that I can recreate a new hairline for her. Again, I'm going to re-solidify the top dot so I know where her forehead is, and then give her a little middle part by just expressing a line. So as you can see, with a slightly curved line, I'm connecting that top dot to the top dot of her ears, which gives a simple impression that her hair is going across her forehead and tucking behind her ears. As I've said many times, practice is important. If any section of this video is confusing, please go over it. Now, step 5, the final details. So this is a good base, but it lacks a little bit of something. So I'm going to add eyelashes, hair texture, freckles, and earrings. These are all totally optional. If you don't want to do them, you don't have to, but I think this is what really completes and makes a face look put together. So, eyelashes. They can be a little bit tricky. The biggest thing is you don't want to just go all straight across where you can see each individual eyelash. What I like to do is start at the outermost corner and just do little flicks. Then I'm going to bring each of those little flicks in, going from the outside to the inner corner very gently, and getting a little bit more sparse as we get to the inner corner. I think this looks natural and isn't overwhelming. I'm going to add 2 little for the bottom, and I think that's good. For eyelashes, I don't like to overdo it. Now, hair texture. This is all about following the direction that you think the hair is going in. So remember how I said it was sweeping over the face and behind the ear? I'm accentuating that by pretending it has creases because it's being tucked behind the ear. Going down, it's also going to flow downward. So I'm going to draw vertical lines on that bottom part to make it have the impression of going from the top to being tucked behind the ear to falling behind the ear in that vertical motion. You can add as many lines as you like, although I really do think that minimal is better, especially when we have a face that isn't so textured everywhere else. Freckles are one of my favorite ways to make a simple face look really put together and complicated. And all you have to do is just add dots randomly and sporadically with maybe a little bit of emphasis around the cheeks and nose, all over the face, and look at that. It's just, they're magical. I don't know, I love freckles. Next, earrings. If you've seen some of my other shorts, you also know that I love earrings. So I'm just gonna give her a couple piercings by adding some simple circles and then a couple like half bar shapes toward the top of her ear as if she has cartilage piercings. Now look at that. That is a textured and detailed face, and we just did that. If this was difficult for you, but you've made it this far, good job. I'm proud of you. Learning how to draw, especially without a reference, is super hard, and you just built this from the ground up. I mean, look, we designed our own face shape, our own eye shape, mouth shape, and nose shape, and we've put it all together, and we've made something that actually looks like a face. That is so cool. And it also means a lot of practice. Again, if it was hard and you don't really like your result, that just means you need to practice it more, and you can watch any section of the video as much as you like. But if you're feeling confident, try it on your unlined paper. If you want me to see how you did, tag me at official.ralarasha on Instagram, and I'll leave you a like. In the meantime, if this helped you, please like, comment, and subscribe, and know that all it takes is practice, and you are a great artist. See you next time.